always a good weekend when the Huskers win, right? All right, all right. Well, thank you all for joining us today for this press briefing on the state's response to the pandemic. And as always, we want to remind people that we still do have the virus in our community. And so we need to take steps to be able to slow down that spread. That's why we've talked about making sure you keep that 6 feet of distance between you and other people when you are going out in public, wearing a mask when you go to the store, wash your hands often for 20 seconds at a time. That actually kills the virus. If you're sick, you have to stay home. Cannot have people going out if they're sick and spreading the virus. Obviously, it's the holiday season now, so shop once a week by yourself. Or if you're going to go to the store for Christmas shopping, don't take the whole family. Just go by yourself. Try to make sure we're reducing the number of people that are in those stores doing the holiday shopping. And of course, as we're thinking about the holiday shopping, it's a good time to be extra careful with the holidays coming up so that you're not getting sick and potentially going to the hospital over the holidays. That's not going to be any fun for anybody, but you don't want to carry the virus to other family members. So as we lead up to Christmas here, it's a really good time for everybody just to really slow down and make sure that you're not giving the opportunity for the virus to spread. You know, avoid the 3 C's, those crowded places, confined spaces, close contact. All those things will help us slow down the spread of the virus so that we can make sure that everybody has a good holiday season. So please keep that in mind. Of course, Test Nebraska is out there as well. As you're thinking about, again, not taking that virus to family gatherings, you go to Test Nebraska. We have actually returned back nearly 500,000 tests. We're at 499,000 tests. And it's available to anybody who wants to sign up. On Friday, Lincoln got a second pod, and now we will be able to, starting today, take Lincoln up to 1,100 scheduled tests per day. So Lincoln will have more capacity here. So again, please take advantage of testnebraska.com, sign up. Over 566,000 Nebraskans have signed up for that. So you can sign up for Test Nebraska, go schedule yourself an appointment. That'll be another way to help slow down the spread of the virus. So please keep all those things in mind. And of course, all of this is around making sure that we are protecting our hospital capacity. Right now we have 32% of our hospital beds are available, 30% of our ICU beds are available, and 68% of our ventilators are available. And if you look at our chart over here, you can see that over the weekend we fell to under 800 hospitalizations. So I want to thank all the Nebraskans who have been taking those steps to slow down the spread of the virus, staying home more, going to the store by themselves, staying home when they're sick, working from home. That's helping us slow down the spread of the virus here, and that is resulting in decreased hospitalizations. And in fact, if you look at this, you'll see that we've fallen below the yellow line now for a couple of days. So if we continue to see progress here, we will move from the orange phase to the yellow phase, and that will allow us to lighten up some of these restrictions. So thank you to everybody who's been helping slow down the spread of the virus, but please continue. This is no time to let down our guard. We need to continue to follow all the rules, use the tools we've been given, slow down the spread of the virus. All right. So, and then also today is Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, December 7th, the 79th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. Flags will be flown at half-staff in remembrance of all the brave soldiers, sailors that fought at Pearl Harbor, and of course that was what led to the entrance of us into World War II. Okay, so today we have Ted Carter, who's the president, obviously, of the University of Nebraska, who is here with us today. The University of Nebraska, not only did the Huskers win this weekend, had a successful football weekend, but also have had a very successful semester. Obviously, I've got some personal experience with this. My son Roscoe is going to the University of Nebraska. He had some in-person classes. And let me tell you, if you look around the country, that is not true everywhere. There's a lot of schools who are not doing in-person classes. The fact the University of Nebraska could have in-person classes, be able to take all the appropriate steps and have a very successful semester really speaks volumes about the preparation and the leadership of President Carter to be able to pull off a very successful semester here. So we're very pleased to have President Carter here to talk a little bit more about the semester that just finished up and maybe a preview of what you're going to be looking at next semester. So President Carter, I ask you to come on up.
Morning, everyone, and Governor Ricketts, thank you for allowing me the opportunity just to come and say a few words to our fellow Nebraskans out there. And I also want to thank the governor for highlighting that today is Pearl Harbor Day. As somebody that wore the uniform for 38 years, this is an important day in our nation's history. A day, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt said on December 8th, a day that would live in infamy, a day in which 2,402 Americans, many of whom were Nebraskans, paid the ultimate sacrifice. A day also that brought us into the war in World War II, a war which we would win in the Pacific, we would win in Europe. And as I reflect on today, there are some parallels. It was a day where we had an unprovoked attack on our nation, and we've been living on an unprovoked attack on us through a global pandemic. And all of these things are related, and as we come together at the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, my hope and my prayer is that we as Nebraskans and as all of us as Americans can win this war against the global pandemic. I'm also thinking about Ed Guthrie today, a Nebraskan, our last Pearl Harbor survivor, 102 years old from Omaha, who on that day, as a 23-year-old electrician's mate, was serving on the USS Whitney and would go on to help fight in that war and continue to serve in World War II. As the governor pointed out, we had an exceptional semester across the board of the university system. And first and foremost, I want to just say thank you to the governor, thank you to our legislators here in the state that had enough confidence in us to support us with our budget for this fiscal year. Every element of what we do in business, education, government has been challenged during this global pandemic, and we made some specific steps to make sure that we could be successful. And I'll just remind some folks out there, one of the things that we did, we were one of the first universities in the country to say that we plan to be open in the fall. And that was after closing our campuses in the spring and going to all remote education, staying remote in the summer, and then being very focused on affordability, attainment, as well as the success and the growth of our students, all while keeping a keen eye on our most important factor, and that was the safety of our faculty, staff, and students. And unlike most of the campuses across the nation, and particularly here in the Midwest, we saw an enrollment growth. And that went against our trend over the last 3 years, and we spent an awful lot of time making sure that we gave ourselves the best chance to not only bring in students to our campuses, to make sure that we made them successful. So where most of the Midwest universities saw enrollment drop, often in as much as double digits, especially on incoming freshmen, more significantly, enrollment drops across the Midwest and across the nation were in first-generation students and ethnic minorities. And we had growth in all of those areas. An overall enrollment growth of 1%, an overall enrollment growth of over 2% for Nebraska students, and a significant enrollment growth in first-generation and ethnic minorities. So I couldn't be more proud of our campus admissions departments, our chancellors leading, and then some of the other things we did. Holding off on tuition rates for 2 years. The fact that we took our online course per credit hour down in cost, 7% at Lincoln, 9% in Omaha. And it wouldn't be a surprise to anybody that our online programs grew by over 18% this year, even with in-person education, online dedicated programs, and then this other piece that is becoming the future of education, which is these hybrid programs, where you're teaching in class synchronously and yet teaching to a remote audience. One of the most strategic things that we did, and this was done through Dr. Susan Fritz, our university provost and executive vice president, as well as our other chief academic affairs officers, was to take a look at the academic calendar. And as many of you know, we brought students back a week early here in Lincoln. We brought all of our students back for in-person education by the 24th of August. But the significance of that, as we anticipated what might have happened here in the fall, which has happened, is the rise of infection rate came up. So we finished all courseware and exams in Lincoln by Thanksgiving. Those students are now on a break. And in Omaha and Kearney, they're finishing up now their final exams, mostly by remote. And as we now go into the winter intersessional, just now starting to look a little bit forward, our programs at Lincoln have opened up a longer winter intersessional, bringing our students back for the spring semester in late January rather than early January. This has opened up an opportunity for online education signups at Lincoln, in which right now we're over 1,300 students signed up, offering over 60 different courses. This is the first time we've ever had that. So what that does is it allows some students to finish their academic program maybe a semester or even a full year early as we start to bring this forward. And as we're starting to think about the spring, I will tell you that we do plan to be in person. We're very well aware of the infection rate. I think what you're going to see us do is significant more testing as we bring our students back. Again, I want to thank Governor Ricketts for what he's done in offering Test Nebraska. It's what allowed us to keep our student, faculty, and staff safe as we go forward. We're going to be exploring much, much larger numbers. You've probably even seen already that UNL is looking at a full, everybody coming back to campus getting a test before they come on campus. So, we're talking about 25,000 students and a significant amount of faculty and staff. And that's to make sure that we are giving the message that we're going to be as safe as possible to bring our students back. And we're already looking forward to the fall. And as we look forward to the fall, I can tell you right now, from where we were last year to where we are this year across the university system, we're up 7% in applications for the fall semester. So the messaging, the programs that we've set out in place have had a significant impact. And again, I want to thank the governor personally for some of the programs that he has helped sponsor for us. The Career Scholarship Program that the unicameral supported, allowing us to take $2 million in scholarship programs to help fill the gap in those high skill, high need, and high paid jobs that are sometimes known as the H3 across the entire state. In fact, I just have a short anecdote before I turn the microphone back over to the governor, just to show the power of this program. We recently had a young woman who was in a nursing program who lives actually or comes from Utica, Nebraska. As you all know, that's a town between Seward and York, about 800 population. She was going to school in Missouri, and she found out about this program, applied for it at UNK, and got in. And guess what? She's coming back to Nebraska. She's going to finish her nursing program there. And I have a pretty good feeling we're going to keep this talented young lady to work here in the state of Nebraska. This is just one of those powerful stories that brings these scholarships and brings this workforce through our student work back here to the state of Nebraska. So I'm very proud of what our team has done across the board for the fall semester, and I'm incredibly optimistic for what we're going to see going into the spring. Governor, I'll turn the microphone back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, President Carter, and congratulations on getting that young lady back. That's awesome. And then also, you mentioned Ed Guthrie, but Don Stratton, who wrote All the Gallant Men, is a Red Cloud native, and so that was our one book, Nebraska, I think last year, so another opportunity, just passed away, opportunity to be able to read about the experience on Pearl Harbor, when he was at Pearl Harbor. And then I want to thank President Carter as well. You all may have seen myself and the federal delegation published a editorial in the World Herald this weekend with regard to getting the Space Force Command, and President Carter has been very helpful as we've been putting together the case for why we are the best place to have that Space Force Command here. So thank you very much, President Carter, for that as well. Okay, so one of the things that we have done is we have tried to highlight that while many people who get the virus may have mild symptoms or no symptoms at all, some people will be severely impacted, and there's just no way to tell who that is going to be. So we want to make sure that we're slowing down the spread of the virus. Nobody wants to get this virus. And so joining us today by Zoom, we have Brad Edgerton, who is a manager of the Frenchman Cambridge Irrigation District, and I think we're going to have him up on the screen here. There we go. Brad, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Governor?
I'm doing well, doing well. Thank you so much for joining us. Would you share your experience with getting the coronavirus and really talk to folks about how this is not something they want to get and really avoid getting?
Yes. I'm happy to be here as a survivor telling you about my story. You know, we just finished up irrigation season. We got through irrigation season just fine, but on Sunday, September 13th, that evening I come down with a fever. I had a fever Monday and Tuesday, So on Thursday, I did the drive-through test Nebraska here in Cambridge, and then I got my results from that on a Sunday morning. I got a positive test on that, and then my wife, she went in Monday to get tested. She works in the high school up here in the main office, so it was critical that she was tested and make sure that she didn't have it. But we were both home for that week. Well, Tuesday morning, I woke up early, was getting ready for the day, and I blacked out that morning. And my wife was sleeping in the other room because she didn't have her results back. So we were kind of, trying to stay as far apart in the house as we could. But I don't know how long I was out for, but I woke up, got up, told my wife. So we called the hospital, and they said, you probably ought to get in here, get checked out. So that afternoon, we went into the hospital, checked my blood pressure, and I had some underlying health conditions. I had blood clots a year before, but I had high blood pressure was probably the main thing. And my oxygen levels were good. They checked me out, but they weren't comfortable sending me home at that time, just knowing how fast this thing can go south on us. So they actually sent me to Kearney by ambulance. They took me to Kearney, and I checked in at Kearney. I was over there for 3 days. Everything really tested out all right, but the entire time I was there, my blood pressure was low, and they didn't put me back on my blood pressure medication. And so apparently this virus affects your blood pressure. And I think between taking my medication and the coronavirus, it got so low is the only reason we think, that I blacked out that morning. But anyway, I got out of the hospital and was doing fine. We spent the time at home, me and my wife. She ended up having a positive test, so we were quarantined at the same time. But we really didn't get back to work. We were cleared to go back to work on October 12th. And then I was off my blood pressure medicine for a couple of weeks after that, and then gradually had to go back on it as I got better. But yeah, it affects people in different ways, and it turned out well for us. My wife had minor symptoms, just a slight fever, but it really just makes you tired more than anything. You just can't get enough sleep, and your body's really zapped that way. But so, appreciate all the healthcare workers. I mean, they did a great job, in Cambridge and in Kearney. Really hats off to them for being on the front line of this thing and taking good care of us. So with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Hey, thank you very much, Brad. So you said you got back, I think, about October 13th or so. Does that mean that you were really out of work for about a month? Is that right?
Yes, it was, basically, almost a whole month. And, I feel great now. We have the antibodies in our system, and, we've kind of been able to let our guard down a little bit because,
Don't do that. Don't let your guard down.
Well, we're hoping since we've had it that, getting it a second time is going to be a lot more remote, I guess. So, but.
Well, good. Well, we're glad you and your wife have both recovered from the coronavirus, and thank you very much for sharing your story because, again, I think it highlights that while, like your wife, can have mild symptoms, because of some of your underlying healthcare conditions with the high blood pressure and the medicine you were taking, had a big impact on you, and again, you were out of work for a month. So this is something that even if you think you're not going to be impacted by a lot, it can still cause you to go to the hospital, to be out of work for a month, and that's why we want people to take those steps, especially with the holiday season coming up, to slow down and really prevent the spread of the virus.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Thanks for being with us.
You bet.
All right. Also related to the pandemic, One of the things we had done was I signed an executive order that had waived the requirements for licensure with regard to healthcare professionals. That was due to expire at the end of December. I today signed an executive order that will extend that till 30 days after the end of the emergency. So that will allow, for example, doctors and nurses to be able to come from other states and so forth, but we'll be waiving that requirement for the licensure on healthcare workers, again, till 30 days past the end of the emergency, and that was an executive order that I signed today. Also, there was a story in the World Herald over the weekend about some issues with regard to CARES Act funding grants and the application process. Some people had, for example, gone online, didn't save their application when they sent it in, and so it wasn't registered in our system. DED and Deloitte are following up with those folks. We do have a deadline of Wednesday, so if you think that your application was not being considered or that was rejected in error, Wednesday's the deadline to get back to us. You can find that at coronavirus.nebraska.gov. There's a number there that you can call in and contact us and let us know, and we can review your case there. So the adjudication deadline, again, is Wednesday for that. So please, if you think that there was an error on your grant application, call in, let us know. You can find that phone number at coronavirus.nebraska.gov. And then this week, with regard to press appearances, we will continue to have the press conferences on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I'll be back here again in the hearing room Wednesday at 10 a.m., Friday at 10 a.m. Also today at 2 p.m. Central Time is the Governor's Radio Call-In Show that we have every month. It's the longest running radio call-in show in the country for a governor. And with that, we'll go ahead and open up to questions and answers. Taylor, do you have some questions that were sent in ahead of time?
Yep, we got a couple. Don Walton wants to know, do you support another round of federal pandemic financial assistance, and if so, what should it include?
So Don Walton wants to know if, from the Journal-Star, wants to know if I support another round of federal aid to the country with regard to the pandemic, and if so, what does it look like? I do think targeted programs like the Paycheck Protection Program or the PPP program were very successful. So we'd certainly encourage the Congress to take up some of those targeted programs that will help us make sure that we can get through these next few months until we get the vaccine widely distributed.
Michelle Van Der from KTV would like to know, has the state stopped using Med88 for coronavirus testing, and if so, why?
Michelle Bandor wants to know if we've stopped using Med88 for statewide testing, and if so, why? And I got to tell you, Michelle, I am not familiar with that, so we're going to have to get back to you on that one. I'm not familiar with that term Med88, so we'll have to follow up with you on that because I just don't know.
And then we have a question from Jeff Robb for Ted Carter, and he would like to know, can you elaborate on the return to campus testing and spring semester testing you're looking at?
Don't forget to repeat the question.
Yeah, the question was, could I elaborate on the testing protocols that we talked about and return back to campus for the spring? Obviously, as a university system, we have multiple campuses. Just to remind everybody, our flagship campus in Lincoln with Dr. Ronnie Green, our chancellor there, are working through the details of how to bring everybody back safely and test every single person that will reside on campus or go to classes on campus, to include faculty and staff. So that's a different approach than we had made before. He's working through the details of that, but I wanted to give everyone a heads up that we are working through that. There'll be slight differences at our UNK and our two campuses in Omaha, although I would just tell everybody you can expect more testing to be done. Now, there's a price tag that goes with that, and although we've enjoyed the generous offering that the state and the governor have given us with Test Nebraska, we're looking at what options we will use to best facilitate that type of testing when our students and faculty and staff come back in January. So not exactly the same answer for the requirements at University of Nebraska at Omaha or at our Med Center or out in Kearney, but more details on that to come soon.
Anything else, Taylor? Okay, so folks in the room, questions?
How do you account for the number of infections going down, the hospitalizations are going down, but the deaths are going up? It seems like things are going two different ways.
So Paul Hamill is asking, from the World Herald, is asking, It looks like hospitalizations and infections are going down, but deaths are going up. And if you think about it, okay, so the fatalities are going to lag behind, for example, hospitalizations. And so I would say that's one of the reasons. And what we've seen is, over the last 2 weeks, our case counts are down about 25%, and hospitalizations are down, I can't remember, from 987 that we had on November 20th, 10 or 15% from there. So I'm hopeful that what we'll see is a slowdown in the number of fatalities that are being reported as well. We'll have to wait and see. But again, this is another reason why we want to make sure people continue to not let their guard down, follow all of our rules with regard to how we keep that social distancing, wearing a mask, washing your hands, staying home when you're sick. All those sort of things will help us slow down the spread of the virus.
Why are those numbers down? Why are virus infections and hospitalizations?
So why are hospitalizations and cases rates down?
Is it just because people are taking precautions? Do you think there's something going on with the virus now, or what?
So I think that there's a couple of things. So Paul's asking to follow up on that. So I think a couple of things. One, that Nebraskans are being more cautious. It's certainly anecdotally what I see, that Nebraskans are slowing down. When I talk to businesses, that's what they tell me as well, that Nebraskans are slowing down more. They're not going out as much and that sort of thing. So I think people are being more aware and taking more steps. I think you'll see, for example, more mask wearing as well. So I think there's a lot of things that are going on right now that are helping slow that down. And then also, I think if you just look across the upper Midwest, we saw those states that had been seeing cases go up everywhere from Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Kansas, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana. I think you're seeing all their kind of peaks are starting to come back down as well. So there might be a more regional trend with regard to that.
Question from President Carter.
President Carter?
You said you were aware of the way infections were going. Do you have any figures for how many students have been infected at this point?
I don't have the final end-of-year numbers. I can tell you this, and we did track this obviously as closely as you can imagine. We did see some numbers on all the campuses when students first came to campus. As you know, a lot of campuses, excuse me, let me go back. The question, which I didn't repeat, was did we report on the numbers for the end of year for our infection rate on the campuses, and were we tracking that? And so to bring that back to the answer is I don't have the exact numbers to put in front of you today, although we do have them. We have been talking about them campus by campus. The thing that I do want to reiterate, and the governor has talked about this as well as some of the other leadership, the challenges with the high infection rate, as opposed to some other states, I would tell you did not come from our college and university campuses. We were well less than 1/4 of any infection rate, even as the pandemic infection rate was rising, even at our most populated campuses. This indicates that there was a significant behavioral change that occurred with our students, our faculty and staff, that I just couldn't be more proud of. Now, were we perfect? No. Were there some cases? There were, especially, as I said, at the beginning of the return to the academic year. But I will also tell you that throughout, you were talking 51,000 students, 16,000 faculty and staff. When you look at that population, even with a very small percentage of infection rate, we had virtually no hospitalizations, which I don't think is insignificant. So as we're talking about the success of the fall semester, I would be remiss if I did not talk about what I think has been a very well executed, safely navigated return back to the classroom across the board for our faculty, staff, and our students.
President, while you're still up there, do you expect any drop off in enrollment or even a pickup in the second semester?
Yeah, we're tracking. The question is, am I expecting any drop off enrollment as we go into the spring semester? And as you can imagine, we're tracking that very closely. In our metropolitan campus in Omaha, we are seeing a little bit of melt between the fall semester and the beginning of the spring semester, and partially that is because so many of our students there are in the full-time workforce, and they're trying to find that balance between either taking online education or coming back into full-time classroom education. At UNL, we're actually seeing rock solid, maybe even a little bit of an increase. So overall, I think we'll find ourselves pretty well balanced between the fall and the spring. And then, of course, as I'm looking forward to next fall, I'm cautiously optimistic because of some of the things that we've done with Nebraska Promise, the tuition freeze, even taking a look at our academic calendar for next year, our cost for online programs, and our application numbers, as I said earlier, are up about 7% across the entire system for where we were at this time last year.
While you're up there, I ask a
Yes.
question. It's related, but were dropouts up this fall? Did more students drop out? Did you see that during this fall?
So the question is, did we see more dropouts this fall? And the answer to that question is, retention, which is most critical between the first and second year, was actually up across our campuses. So our retention numbers were actually good going in here. Now, like I said, we're tracking that very closely as we go from the fall to the spring. You can have a retention challenge across that semester. But across the board, all the programs that we're offering, our numbers are rock solid right now. And I'm excited about that. That's an important part because as we brought in 7,000 students that applied for Nebraska Promise, we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make them successful.
And can you kind of go back on why you think Nebraska is a good site for this space,
Yeah, the question is, why do I think Nebraska is a good site for the future of U.S. Space Command? And I'm really glad you asked this question. I'm really thrilled that the governor highlighted, just the consensus building that's happening from the governor level to our federally elected officials to the entire state. I'm going to give you the first part of this answer as somebody that wore the uniform for 38 years first. I mean, I can't just walk away from the fact that I served in the Navy for 38 years and not have an opinion about this. And as somebody that came to the state that didn't previously live here and have gotten to know Nebraska in my first year, the first thing I would tell you is the state of Nebraska embraces its military members and veterans like no place I've been before. There's a feel about it. It's something really special. I have sensed that since I've been here. And then you look at the success of what we already have here. So the programs that we have out at Offutt Air Force Base with the U.S. Strategic Command there, the fact that U.S. Space Command, when it was principally an Air Force unit, was there from 2002 to 2019. I mean, it was already here for 17 years. And then as you look at what the future of what a U.S. Space Command's mission is to be, I would tell you, first of all, the synergy between a major unified command, this would be our 11th unified command in the United States, and the synergy that exists between that command, its mission, and what we have at U.S. Strategic Command is critical. The fact that the United States Marine Corps Space Command has already made a decision to land at Offutt is not insignificant. And then you take in the other pieces that are so important. The quality of life, the cost of living that is here in the state of Nebraska, the geography that we have, how we live through, the issues dealing with Mother Nature. I mean, we don't have to deal with hurricanes here. The amount of tornadoes that have been here out in this region have gone down over the last 10 years significantly. And even though, yes, we had a flooding incident in 2019, they were less affected out at Offutt Air Force Base, and there are some military construction projects to help protect them even further. But a big element, again, and I'll go from wearing the uniform to my role as a university president, is the absolute need for a unified command like U.S. Space Command to be connected to academia. I mean, we have that, and it's very strong with U.S. Strategic Command. We have the only university-affiliated research center, one of 14, but the only one that has a sponsorship with a unified command and U.S. Strategic Command. So the National Strategic Research Institute, now on its 10th year, has proven itself as an organization that supports the military, has been dynamic in shifting its mission set a little bit less from counter weapons of mass destruction to now into the nuclear deterrence for the 21st century. I mean, this is significant. And U.S. Space Command is going to be looking for a university-affiliated research center. So we at the university are already working on building a Midwest consortium. We're talking about our leadership of academia in North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, and of course, our Big Ten partnerships. We can bring something together that looks at academic programs for which we have already proven. For example, we've created a space law program at UNL just because the U.S. Air Force said that they needed something like that a number of years ago. We can shift dynamically with these capabilities, and this is something else that's very special about the Midwest. You know, this university-affiliated research center may not actually be located at one of our campuses. It may be in North Dakota. They have been pushing for one for years. We would help them build that and make them the sister UARC to our own well-established NSRI. And then again, further research programs, developing academic programs that will help fulfill the future workforce of U.S. Space Command. So when you look across the board, the affordability, the livability, the land that we have there out at Offutt Air Force Base, what we bring in terms of our academic prowess and our affiliations with other universities here in the Midwest, I'm telling you, this is really exciting. I honestly believe that we are going to be one of the lead sites out of the final 6 places that U.S. Space Command has a chance to come here to Nebraska.
We have a couple more questions for President Carter from Jeff at the World Herald.
Oh, actually, before we get there, just real quick. I just want to piggyback on that real quick, too. The other thing that we've got here is just a great history of public-private partnerships here in the state that are really beneficial. So, for example, look at the IXL Center at the University of Nebraska. You look at the commitment to the next project that the the legislature and myself signed off on for this year to compete for that Defense Department program. If you look at what's happened with the VA Ambulatory Center in Omaha and how successful that has been in reducing costs for federal taxpayers and bringing that project in ahead of schedule. Contrast that with the VA project in Aurora, Colorado that was $1 billion over budget and late. I think you see a track record of success here with those public-private partnerships. So just wanted to piggyback on because your remarks were perfect. I love it. But just,
That public-private partnership's
that's a
huge.
big deal that we've got that I don't think other communities can match. So with that, Taylor, I'm going to turn it back over to you and President Carter.
Just first question is, President Carter, do you mean there are virtually no hospitalizations amongst students or staff or both?
So the question was, were there no hospitalizations of student, faculty, or staff within the university system? To my knowledge, there were 2, and both of them were precautionary. One was a student, one was staff, and it was short stay, and they came back and both got over their infection.
The second question is, what do you expect for in-person classes in the spring semester? Fewer, more, or about the same?
Well, it'll vary depending on, the question is, what do I expect for in-person classes at our campuses coming back in the spring? Obviously, it will vary depending on campus, but if we go to more testing and we can figure out the cost method for how we can do that, our objective is to do more, especially at our flagship campus in Lincoln. We were about 70-30 in terms of in-person versus remote education at our flagship. That was almost the exact inverse of the other 13 Big Ten schools with the possible exception of Purdue. So we want to stay at that level and maybe even be able to go up a little bit higher. Slight different numbers out at Kearney and UNO and UNMC. And again, the objective here is as we go through bringing the vaccine, at some point our faculty and staff are likely to be in that next wave of those that will have that opportunity. As we start to go through that in the spring, going into the summer, I think we have an opportunity to do much less dedicated remote and more in person.
That's all I got for now.
Thank you, President Carter. Andrew.
There appears to be a new push, a petition drive to put recreational marijuana on the ballot right now. I guess, what's your opinion of that? And how do you think that impacts medical marijuana?
So Andrew's saying that there's a new push to have recreational marijuana on the ballot for the next election, and how does that impact medical marijuana? And again, that's my point exactly, is that there's no such thing as medical marijuana. It's a drug. And the long-term plan for the big marijuana industry is to make it available in a recreational way. So we have a methodology for drugs becoming safe and effective and being legal, and it's called the Food and Drug Administration. They go through the testing. There are derivatives of the components of marijuana that have been incorporated into drugs, and that's the proper process. And so for the state to go around that process, skip the regulatory process essentially for big marijuana companies, that's just a bad idea and is only going to lead to poor health outcomes. And that's exactly what we've seen in states like Colorado that have done that they passed medical marijuana, recreational marijuana. For crying out loud, you can go to states like Oregon and now you can get hard drugs. It's a step in the progression of continuing to erode away at the regulatory process that protects our people and going around that process to allow these companies to take advantage of people's drug addictions.
But have you seen crime rates go up in either of those states?
So with regard to, Andrew's asking if we've seen crime rates go up in either Colorado or Oregon. We'd have to go take a look at that. Off the top of my head, I don't know the answer, but I can tell you we've certainly seen a lot poorer health outcomes in states like Colorado, where we see increased fatalities of people who are under the influence of marijuana when they're driving. We see increased mental health impacts. We see increased number of young people, 13, 15-year-olds getting access to marijuana. And we know that has a huge impact on the cognitive development of young brains, that marijuana. So there's a lot of poor health outcomes that come from that access to marijuana. Yeah, Paul.
What do you make of the approval of recreational medical marijuana in South Dakota? It's a very similar state. Are you afraid that this is something that could happen here?
So the question from Paul Hamilton, World Herald, is what do I make of the approval of recreational marijuana in South Dakota? And I think that, again, there's a misinformation campaign out there by this big industry, marijuana, the people who are selling marijuana for a profit, that somehow this is benign. And you have people that maybe smoked marijuana back when they were younger, say in the 60s or 70s, and the level of THC in the marijuana at that time was tiny compared to what is in marijuana today. It's a much more dangerous drug today. And so I think there's a misinformation campaign out there by the people who are going to benefit from this lack of regulation so they can avoid that regulation. I think that's what's going on. These are for-profit companies that are trying to go around the regulatory process and make profits off of doing that. Andrew.
And maybe this is a better question for Dr. Antone, but, is one of the reasons why the hospitalization rate is going down is because we're getting more picky about who we hospitalize, especially with COVID, that, you have to meet a higher criteria to be hospitalized now.
So Andrew's asking the question, are hospitalizations going down because hospitals are being more picky about who they hospitalize? And to my knowledge, that's just simply not true. Again, when people are sick enough to go to the hospital, they go to the hospital, and hospitals take care of them. That's what doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals do.
Are you concerned with the hospitalizations and infections going down that people might let down their guard here?
So Paul's asking, am I concerned that people might let down their guard? And that's, again, why we need to continue to stay vigilant. Nebraskans have been taking the right steps to be able to slow down the spread of the virus. We need people to continue to take those steps, especially with the Christmas holiday coming up. Again, people want to spend time with their families, so now is the time to be extra precautious, to really take that chance to slow down the spread of the virus by, again, staying home when you're sick, go shopping once a week, avoid those 3 C's. Those are all things that help make sure that you can be healthy for the holiday season.
Have you seen an uptick in testing?
Have we seen an uptick? The question is, have we seen an uptick in testing? I know that we did a lot of tests last week, but as far as, I know, so in general, our testing has gone up. Off the top of my head, though, I can't tell you what those numbers are, but we can get that for you, Paul.
What's a pod? You said there's a second.
Oh, a pod. So the question was, what is a pod? So understanding that there was going to be the weather was going to get colder, and we needed to protect the people who were doing Test Nebraska, the state has purchased a number of pods, and what they are, they're basically metal shelters. They're either a walk-up metal shelter or a drive-through metal shelter. If you want to think of the drive-through one, it's almost like a mini garage. So we've got 2 of them installed now at here in Lincoln. They have 2 bays each, so it's 4 bays. And basically you drive up, they open the garage door, you pull in where the testing healthcare workers are, close the door, swab you where it can stay relatively warm and avoid the wind, and then they let you back out. So it's a way to be able to protect the workers and the people getting testing from the inclement weather.
And I was told there's a second lab that's being set up. Process test, is that one operational?
And so Paul's asking, is there a second lab being set up? And there is no second lab being set up right now. Doesn't mean we might not consider that for the future, but we're not doing it right now. The current Test Nebraska lab here in Lincoln at St. Elizabeth's is doing a fantastic job. They really have gotten that system down. We're getting most of those test results back in 24 to 48 hours, I believe. For the last 7 days, we've gotten those tests turned around in 37 hours. So again, they're getting those turned out pretty quick, about a day and a half.
What's the capacity of that lab?
And so the question is, what is the capacity of that lab? We've been able to handle processing about 6,000 tests a day in that lab without any degradation in service. Yeah, Andrew.
Have I personally exceeded my mask mandate questions to you yet, or can I ask another?
You can ask another mask mandate question for Andrew.
You know, if the universal mask mandate is not that much different than what you already have in place, why not just order a universal mask mandate?
So Andrew's saying, why not just order a universal mask mandate? And again, we put mask requirements in our directed health measures where it's appropriate. So in businesses where you're going to be closer than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, you ought to be wearing a mask. And so we're using the tool in an appropriate way, and that's what we're asking everybody to do. Use a mask when it's appropriate, but also remember that masks by themselves are not going to stop this virus. It's that Swiss cheese layered effect we keep talking about. So it's, yes, wear a mask when you're going to the store, but also make sure you're washing your hands often, that you're staying home when you're sick, that you're keeping that 6 foot of distance between you and other people. You're avoiding the 3 C's. When you go shopping, go by yourself. All those sort of things are going to help us slow down the spread of the virus. It's all those layers that will work us to slow down the spread of the virus, not just one thing.
But if it's not that much different than a universal mask mandate, why not just silence your critics and do it?
So Andrew's like, well, but if, Andrew's saying, well, it's not that much different, so why not just silence your critics and do it? And again, we're doing it where it's appropriate. And we're just going to continue to do where it's appropriate. And we're doing it, again, remember, the whole reason we do all these non-pharmaceutical interventions, like masks and the 6 foot of distance, is to protect our hospital capacity. That's what we're staying focused on, is protecting our hospital capacity. Other questions?
President Carter had a comment.
President Carter?
The comment I wanted to make was in reference to the question about the pod. And the governor answered, what is a pod? For the audience out there, there may be some confusion because pod is used interchangeably with a bunch of other things. So for example, out in Omaha right now, we have 8 hockey teams that are part of the National Collegiate Hockey Conference that are in what's called a pod, which means that they are in kind of an imaginary bubble, staying isolated, and they're playing 40 hockey games in the month of December. And just to show you the effectiveness of how this works, at the UNO ice hockey team, we have not had a single positive going into practice and into this season yet. And that program's working very, very effectively. They're playing upwards of 2 to 3, 4 games a day across that conference.
And if I could just add on one more thing, the pods that we have, which are the metal, fabricated structures, are being produced right here in Lincoln by a Lincoln company called PEI. So, great Nebraska company helping us out. Other questions? Yes, Paul.
You're here, I might as well ask it.
Paul's comment was, you're here, I might as well ask it.
You've been asked something. You're from the investment world. What's it mean when the CEO and CFO sell all their stock in their own?
So the question was, what does it mean when a CEO and CFO sell all the stock in their company? As you know,
Concerning to you?
excuse me?
Is that a concern, red flag to you?
So the question is it a red flag? So as you know, there's all sorts of reasons why people may hold on to their stock or sell their stock. The Securities and Exchange Commission regulates all this, so it really is up to them to regulate whether or not, in any given company, the officers are behaving appropriately when they buy or sell stock. So I'm going to leave it up to the Securities and Exchange Commission to manage that. I will tell you that, again, Test Nebraska has been performing wonderfully, wonderfully well. We would not have nearly the amount of testing we have today, and certainly there was at one point when Test Nebraska was making up over half of all the tests we were doing in our state. Now, as we've seen other testing come online, we're seeing that as a percentage going down, but still very important to have the Test Nebraska out there. And frankly, again, having a free test available out there has been huge to be able to help Nebraskans be able to get that test. So we've been very pleased with their performance.
But you are considering opening this up for bid if you do more, if you need more?
So the question is, will we consider opening up for bid? We'll certainly, take that step if it's appropriate down the road. But like I said, we're very pleased with Test Nebraska right now, and I might remind everybody we're still in an emergency. Yeah, Andrew.
I guess, refresh me again, how much more do we have, with Test Nebraska, how many more tests do we have, and when will that run out?
So the question was, how many more tests do we have? We've delivered about almost 500,000. We had originally purchased 580,000, and off the top of my head, I know we purchased some more tests, but I don't know what that number is off the top of my head, but we can get back to you with that. I just don't know how many more tests we purchased.
And for what we pay, do you think we got our money?
And the question was, for what we paid, do we think we got our money worth? And the answer is absolutely yes. Again, we have been able to do testing through Test Nebraska that would not have been possible otherwise. At one point, during the summer, Test Nebraska was over half of all the tests we did here in Nebraska. If we didn't have Test Nebraska, we would be doing half the amount of testing. All right. Again, folks, thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back here at 10 a.m. on Wednesday and Friday for another press update. Please continue to make sure you're practicing all of our good tools to be able to slow down the spread of the virus, keeping that 6 foot of distance, wearing a mask when you go to the store, wash your hands often, stay home when you're sick, work from home if you can. All these things will help us make sure we're slowing down the spread of the virus, and ultimately it's to protect our hospital capacity, so we want to continue to do that. Avoid the 3 C's. Thank you all very much for everybody, what Nebraskans have been doing to slow down the spread of the virus here as we've seen this increase in cases and hospitalizations. And we need to continue to maintain that effort, especially as we go up to the holidays. Nobody wants to be sick during the holidays, so please help us slow down the spread of the virus. Thanks very much, and we'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you, Francis.